Okay, so back to our lecture. See if I can find it. All right. So explanations of social injustice. There are a few of these, and I think that what I want to emphasize about this slide is, oh, that was dramatic, but had no effect. There we go. That biological determinism is crap. So social and economic status has nothing to do with biology. Being a rich white guy has nothing to do with social and economic status. Now, the privileges that come along with being a rich white guy absolutely do, but that's socialization, and that's about um, the historical inequities in the system and how the system is built to privilege certain people and to remove any sort of advantage from other certain people. So anybody who ever comes at you with biological determinism, it's pretty easy to disassemble that argument, because you can just easily look at the fact that there are no appreciable differences between races or ethnicities or anything like that. So that one just doesn't apply. Socialization, though, um, the fact that people do learn from observation and that children behave in the way that they see the people around them behave, that matters. That makes a big difference. Um, Not the least of which because you are surrounded by people who are behaving in a certain way. You learn how to behave in that way, but also do not forget that they they are resourced in whatever way that they're resourced. They have a high level of resource, they have a low level of resource, whatever it is. The resources that they're coming at it with are as part of the socialization. If you are resourced enough to be able to send your child to the most expensive number one private school in the whole city, they're going to be surrounded by other people who are resourced in that way and are behaving in a way that shows that they are resourced. They're driving expensive cars, they have extensive tutors. You get the idea. The socialization process isn't just about how we talk to each other, it's about everything that's around us. So there's psychological perspectives, there's sociological perspectives, and I kind of touch on that a little bit. But the sociological perspectives are the ones that we were talking about in our post last week about poverty, mainly about that. Okay, so there are some models of intergroup relations that I'm not going to spend a whole ton of time on talking about all of these in extreme detail. Essentially, the rest of the lecture is well covered in your textbook, but I just want to touch on a couple of things. The thing about the different models of intergroup relations is that there is no one size fits all. It's kind of a combination of all of this. Like if you come from a family who immigrated, there's a certain amount of integration. There's also a certain amount of pluralism. There's also a certain amount of separatism, and that's going to look differently for every person and within every family and within every culture. And there is no one way to look at it, because guess what? People are different. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of laws that have been created over time to address social injustice, and they're presented to you in your textbook in chronological order. There's a couple of things that I want to emphasize here, and I think the overarching thing is like that nothing that has been done is like the panacea. It's the way that laws happen in our country is that they're sort of reactive. They address a problem, are designed to address a problem, but they are also a product of, politics and negotiation and money and all sorts of things, and rarely are a full-fledged solution to anything, right? And the 15th Amendment is a wonderful example of this. Gave all men, regardless of race or color, the right to vote. Well, sort of, right? So if you will recall your history about this amendment, I mean, that's true, but then that's the way that it is on paper. But when you get down to the brass tacks of how it actually was implemented and all the kind of shenanigans around how to disenfranchise people due to race, and how many years that went by, and an argument can be made are still going by. I think that you'll understand that though a law is passed does not mean that the problem is solved. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1968, these are a lot of the laws that we're familiar with now, sort of take for granted. But again, sort of, right? There are a lot of loopholes in all of this stuff, and institutional oppression is real and is very much keeping the dominant group in power here. So, it's just because a law has been passed does not mean that it doesn't need to be revisited, it doesn't need to be revised, it doesn't need to be added to, and that's why there continue to be laws passed. So Age Discrimination and Employment Act, what I want to underline about this is that it is about people who are 40 years old or above. You cannot legally, in terms of the legal terminology, be discriminated against for being too young. Okay. So the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, what I want to emphasize about this is that it requires reasonable accommodation for folks with disabilities in workplaces and in public facilities. Therefore, if the facility is not public, they don't have to do it, right? So people get confused about that. Okay, so the civil rights for lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, etc., anybody who is essentially not a straight cisgendered person, the legislation on all of this is evolving and fairly quickly, actually, but don't hold your breath on some of it, right? So the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, like we keep talking about this, but it's been out there for 20 years. It still hasn't been passed. It's proposed and proposed and proposed, and nothing happens and nothing happens. And even though there's a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate at this moment, as I record this, don't hold your breath, right? It's not filibuster proof. So it's unlikely to change. So DOMA, I'm not going to really go into. You can read about that in your book. It is exceptionally flawed. Okay, so the Matthew Shepard Act, essentially, it was designed to investigate and prosecute bias-motivated violence. This is a good law. It's not a huge law in the sense that it doesn't go on for 5,000 pages or something. So it's not that difficult to understand. It's an important piece of legislation. Okay, so their affirmative action, sort of a third rail of social injustice for a lot of reasons. I really would love for you to visit this Balanced Politics website and just sort of take a look and at what this is all about. You don't have to, write a paper. I did think about that, but you don't have to write a paper about it or an assignment or anything. But like, there are two sides to the affirmative action argument, and you should formulate an opinion. You should come up with one that that you feel strongly about. Okay. So immigration rights. So there's about, I think, 330 million people in the United States total. 11.1 million of them, vaguely, are not documented immigrants. So there are various laws about this. Most of them are local about this, and there in recent years have been major human rights violations on the border under the guise of preventing undocumented immigration. So I'm not going to put any commentary on that, but it is that's something that we are still working to unravel to for example, reunify children with their families. Okay, so your role as a social worker in fighting against these issues. So all of this, but you know, we've talked about all of this before. It's your job to help prevent discrimination and, you know, to advocate for policy changes, all of this. But what I've added to this slide is that it's your job to work against assumptions and automatic ideas that perpetuate inequity, not just in work, not just from 9 to 5, like any social work job is 9 to 5. It's not. But if you feel strongly about being in the field, you have to live the field to a certain extent. You know, like, and I'm not saying that you take your client work home with you, but when you see the people around you acting in a way that perpetuates assumptions and automatic ideas that perpetuate inequity, you are ethically bound to do something about it. So let me give you an example. So this was literally today. So I'm in some mom groups on Facebook, and somebody posted this screenshot that they got from I don't know where, and this other mom had picked up this car seat from outside a dumpster. So for those of you who don't have children or whatever, car seats are a single accident. So if you have an accident with a car seat in your car, you're supposed to replace it. So aside from the fact that this mom got the car seat from outside of a dumpster, also she didn't know the history of it. So, you know, she doesn't necessarily know that it hasn't been in an accident, so she doesn't know that it's safe. That's the idea. All right, so this was posted as a screenshot in one of my groups. And then there was a whole conversation about this, right? And most of the conversation was essentially along the lines of, you know, oh my God, you know, this is gross, and also it's unsafe and all of this stuff. And I just want to give you a second to read through this portion of the conversation. So I'm just going to be quiet for a minute and let you read the screen. So what I want to emphasize here is my comment down here at the bottom. So, you know, the person above me who was kind of defending the you know, it's not clean, it's not safe, all of this stuff, you know, you can perpetuate these ideas about these sort of discriminatory ideas that continue the beliefs around, for example, in this case, poverty, without intending to. And I feel like if you get nothing else out of this portion of the class, it's that you don't have to be intentional about oppressing other people to oppress other people, right? You don't have to intend to basically say, you know, oh, poor people are somehow less, right? All you have to do is fail to kind of think about what systems might be working against people having equity, right? Which is exactly what was going on here, which was exactly what was going on in the comment that I was responding to, the woman who said it's about safety. My parents had no money. They lived week to week. They got their car seats from donation programs. Well, you know, there has to be a donation program near you, right? So if you live in a extremely rural area, that might not be true. You know, like, yeah, in San Francisco, I'm sure they exist, right? But if you live way, way, way out in, I don't know, Kings or something, there might not be one of those programs, right? And you have to know about it. What if you don't have internet? What if you don't have a cell phone, right? So how are you going to know? And you have to be able to qualify. You know, what if you have to show, I don't know, an ID card and you're undocumented and you don't have an ID card? You see the problem, right? So it's sort of a failure to put yourself in the shoes of another person to accidentally perpetuate inequity. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna kind of shoot through these last bits a little bit, but I do want to make sure that you've read about all of this in your book. And make sure that if you have questions, that you come to Zoom office hours or that you send me a message, and I will be happy to do a video. I did that in one of my other classes this week, as somebody sent me a question via email, and I did a video and posted the video in response as an announcement so that everybody could hear the answer to that person's question. So I'm happy to do all of that for you guys. Just let me know if there's anything that I can help with. All right, thank you.